When AMD finally unveiled its long-rumored Strix Halo silicon earlier this year in the ROG Flow Z13, we have all been pretty excited with what it brings to the table, which was, in a nutshell, an integrated GPU performing on par with dedicated solutions, fast CPU cores and shared RAM basically in a package that could potentially rival what Apple has been doing with the M-series chips for years. And while not everything was sunshine and rainbows, the Ryzen Max is an impressive piece of silicon, and many of you wanted to see what it can do in a proper laptop form factor for both gamers and creators alike. Well, meet the HP ZBook Ultra G1a, which is, as far as I know, the only notebook for now being available with Team Red's mobile masterpiece and with up to 16 CPU cores, up to 128 gigs of RAM and the integrated 860S, it turns the 14-inch laptop into a proper workstation. And even aside from the powerful internals, HP's newest addition to their professional lineup is simply a really well-made laptop. However, considering its positioning in the ZBook family, I feel like HP stopped halfway in certain situations, and they could have easily made the Ultra a lot better with some minor fixes. But enough talk, let's get into it. When it comes to specs, we have been able to get our hands on two very different configurations for the sleek 14-incher, and right here in front of me I have the much more modest variant betting on the Ryzen Max Pro 390, which is actually a lower tiered version of AMD's Strix Halo silicon, coming with 12 CPU cores and the integrated 850S, while my colleague in the US got his hands on the absolute high-end SKU, which features the same chip we already tested in the aforementioned ROG Flow Z13, the Ryzen Max Plus Pro 395. That one also gets a 120Hz OLED, 2TB of storage and a whopping 128 gigs of soldered but blazingly fast memory, while this one right here cuts the storage in half, has to make do with a full HD 60Hz IPS and can only rely on 32 gigs of memory. And without wanting to spoil our video too much, this might not be quite enough to make the most out of the silicon here, but more about that later. Because I actually want to start with the ZBook itself before diving into what makes it tick. In terms of overall design and quality, HP definitely did their homework here, and I have been quite impressed with the direction they have been taking their workstations after we reviewed the 16-inch Fury a while back, and the Ultra borrows many of the same design cues. The 14-incher looks incredibly sleek and professional without venturing into boring ThinkPad territory, and with a smooth finish and exceptional rigidity, it feels the part as well. There's absolutely no flex anywhere, and in combination with the excellent keyboard that offers quite a bit of travel and immensely satisfying tactility, the dampened reliable clicks and smooth tracking of the touchpad, and an overall quality feel, the ZBook is a premium companion for all of your daily computing endeavors. That said, compared to other more professionally oriented competitors, the HP is a bit on the heavier side and ventures into 14-inch gaming laptop territory, which I would consider alright given the performance that is slumbering beneath the smooth aluminum covers. When it comes to ports, you get an HDMI 2.1, a USB-C 3.2 Gen 2, a USB-C 4 and the headphone jack on the left, and another USB 4 right next to the USB-A 3.2 Gen 2 on the right, which I would say is a pretty robust set of I/O for such a portable machine.
The 5-megapixel webcam looks very decent, so you are covered for all of your Zoom and Teams meetings.
And while Wi-Fi transmits have been a bit on the slower side for this machine right here, they have been within expected margins for the higher end variant. And I also mentioned it already, the memory is soldered, so once inside the Ultra, you can basically do nothing but exchange the SSD. Alright, let's talk displays, and with our two models, we have also been able to test two very different panel options. And our high-end SKU came equipped with an OLED refreshing at 120Hz, and while you do get the amazing contrast and color performance we are used to by now from the self-emitting display tech, overall brightness is a bit on the lower side, and for a laptop that is aimed at professionals and creators, I would really like to see better initial results when it comes to factory calibration. That said, we have been able to significantly reduce delta E's, making the little workstation suitable for color-critical photo editing, for example. And as always, if you lack the required hardware to achieve the same, you can find our profile on the website. The full HD panel in this one right here trades the glossy glass cover for a matte coating, but unfortunately our overall measurements are a bit disappointing. Do not get me wrong, this is not a bad panel, but considering the price you have to shell out for this one, I would either expect higher brightness or, once again, better factory calibration. Unfortunately, HP also does not include any pre-calibrated presets like sRGB or Rec 709, which is quite the bummer for a creator-focused device and incredibly useful for certain color grading workflows in video editing, for example. And considering that most gaming or consumer laptops like the Razer Blade 14 or the Zephyrus G14 come with this functionality, I really hope they can include it in the future. But with all of that out of the way, let's finally talk about performance. And you know the drill, let us kick things off in the CPU department. I will use Cinebench 24 as our base of comparison here today, since it gives us native results across all platforms. In both of our ZBook models, the respective CPU parts of the APU can consume up to 80 watts in total, and our multi-core scores can easily mop the floor with pretty much everything the competition has on offer. Unless we are talking Apple here, and our Ryzen Max 395 SKU is sitting right up there with what we have seen from the Flow Z13 and an M4 Pro from 2024. Single core performance is still not quite Team Red's strong suit, and as per usual, Apple is doing its own thing for workloads that just need a single CPU core to execute. System performance is quite impressive for systems without an actual dedicated GPU, even though it seems like the Flow is able to squeeze quite a bit more out of the same chip compared to HP's offering. And while the numbers of my ZBook do look quite solid as well, my experience with this one wasn't quite flawless. But let me explain. With these APUs, you have the advantage of dividing the system RAM between the CPU and the GPU parts of the silicon. It is not quite as elegant and dynamic as Apple's implementation, since as far as I know, Windows needs to know at startup how much RAM each component is allowed to use. So every change you want to do needs a restart. ASUS solved this within their management application, while HP buries it in the BIOS, which I'm not sure if it's the most elegant solution, since you might want to change it every now and then, especially if you do not shell out for the 128 gig config. Out of the box, my variant was set to 8 gigs for the GPU and 24 for the CPU, and since I really think the ZBook could be a great on-the-go workstation, I tried it for a few of our videos. Unfortunately, in this config, Resolve 20 crashed a lot and had problems even playing back our footage. It worked much better and much more reliably when switching to 4 gigs for the GPU to leave more RAM for the system itself. So if you plan on doing anything heavier than just photo editing and video work with lightweight codecs, you should definitely invest in a RAM upgrade right from the get-go. That said, this is just one example, and considering the sheer amount of different workstation tasks, your result may vary greatly depending on what you plan to do with this one. But man, I would have loved to try the high-end model for our videos, since the potential I have seen with this one really had me excited once I made it past my initial troubles. Circling back to things we can test objectively, in our synthetic GPU test, the high-end ZBook can outperform the Z13 with the same silicon by a little bit and delivers performance on par with the 2024 G14, while other consumer competitors like the Blade 14 or the 2025 version of the Zephyrus with the 5070 Ti still have the edge here. I know this is not quite the same class of devices, but considering the price points here, I still found it relevant to compare raw performance results. Just keep in mind that APUs like the Ryzen are also about the whole VRAM flexibility, while you are stuck with what you got when it comes to dedicated solutions. TimesSpy paints a similar picture, with the 8060S being on par with a 4070 at a similar wattage, while the 8050S trails behind slightly, while easily beating out every other integrated solution by a very significant margin. This is great news if you use a lot of GPU-accelerated creator or workstation applications. Just keep in mind that performance is once again quite dependent on your chosen RAM config. And if you opt for 32 gigs like with my model right here, you might run into trouble either not having enough system RAM for a fluent experience or running out of video memory. And while the ZBook is not really a gaming laptop, our results illustrate that situation quite well, and our lower-end model had trouble with even launching some titles, despite the default being 8 gigs of video memory, which rarely gave us trouble in full HD with dedicated solutions. If you get your games to run though, they do run quite well, which is impressive for an integrated solution. But again, you will probably be much better off when opting for 64 gigs of shared memory right away if you want to get the most out of your hardware. Our higher end model shows that quite well, and the 8060S can run even some more demanding games in ultra settings in full HD without a problem. All of this performance comes at a bit of a price though, and especially the flagship config of the ZBook can get very audible if you push it, but I would still say, considering what you can get out of it, it is still quite reasonable. My unit behaves a bit more reserved, and I also used it for our noise samples to give you a bit more of a subjective impression. Similarly, battery life is somewhat disappointing for the big boy with just about 7 hours, which is outlasted considerably by the Flow Z13 with the same chip and a slightly smaller battery, while this one right here offers much more endurance when being away from the wall. With about 11 hours in our Wi-Fi test, the smaller Strix Halo chip is definitely the very obvious recommendation if you are looking for the endurance and performance sweet spot. Alrighty good people, it's about time to wrap it up for today. So what are we thinking about the HP ZBook Ultra G1a? Well, if you ask me, the overall packaging they put together is incredibly well executed. And the 14-incher is a very exciting product that could potentially be well suited if you need something subtle while still offering performance you usually either would just get with much bigger workstations or when looking more into consumer or gaming products. So the ZBook kinda combines classic professional qualities like the well-made but cleanly designed chassis with an excellent keyboard, a solid webcam and a generous amount of ports, with the performance figures, especially on the GPU side of things, you simply do not get without a dedicated GPU. That said, you should only really consider the 32GB variant if you do not do heavy work at all, or do some very careful research into what your workflows would actually require. So I would say the 64GB variant is a much safer bet for most users out there, while the prospect of having 128GB in a 14-inch workstation is quite awesome for upcoming AI workloads or should you be into heavy content creation things. All of that comes at a price though, and when it comes to raw performance, some gaming options like the G14 or the Blade 14 can easily offer you even more for less of the upfront cost within the same form factor, even though your colleagues might give you a bit of a side eye when showing up to a meeting with one of those. But as always, let me know what you think. Sound off below. Do not forget to leave a like and sub on your way out, and maybe check out some of our other videos if you cannot get enough when it comes to tech and laptops. Thanks a ton for watching, folks. My name is Alex, you have been fantastic, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.